Hi, and welcome to this live reading from I'll See You Again, book number 4 from the Raining Hearts series by K.G. Fletcher, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Mr. Logan, excuse me, Mr. Logan? As she leaned into the groom's ear, Nikki kept a professional distance while urging her client to respond. He sat crumpled in a chair near the restrooms, bow tie missing, shirt tails hanging out, and his hair plastered to his damp forehead in sweaty pieces. Those impressive tabletop dance moves proved a bit over the top for him despite the encouragement of the crowd just a few minutes earlier. The attractive young couple had been throwing down all afternoon, and here sat the bride's beloved hot mess. Looking around the empty hallway, Nikki contemplated what to do next. The rambunctious groom had clearly overindulged during the afternoon wedding reception, consuming countless shots with his fraternity brothers. It wasn't unusual for a 20-something wedding party to have a good time with numerous cocktails. The bar tab alone would give her a substantial profit. But her reputation as the premier country-themed event venue this side of the Hudson River was built on her business savvy, her personal touches, and her devotion to her clientele. With her hands on her hips, she pursed her lips to the side and shook her head. She knew better than to allow the bartender to keep serving trays of shots to the rowdy bridesmaids and groomsmen, but they seemed to be enjoying themselves. And shouldn't recent college grads know how to party and hold their liquor? Nikki couldn't help but grimace, knowing what a catastrophe this poor newlywed couple's first night was going to be as husband and wife. Instead of a night of passion, the bride would no doubt be holding the groom's hand while he cursed Captain Morgan while worshipping the porcelain god in their hotel bathroom. Oh well, at least they'd have a somewhat funny story to tell their kids someday, about how their daddy was more interested in a pirate than a princess on his wedding day. "Here he is!" one of the groomsmen shouted as he leaned against the wall, staggering to Mr. Logan's aid. A whole slew of handsome guys in various disarrays of tuxes gathered around the groom and slung his limp arms across their shoulders. The enthusiastic group whisked him back into the reception space just in time to set him on his wobbly feet for the couple's send-off through a shower of flower petals into the back seat of a fancy convertible. "Poor fella," Marjorie lamented, coming up alongside her daughter as they watched the guests begin to disperse. "You got that right," Nikki replied, releasing a sigh of relief. As the guests started to clear out, the staff was already in cleanup mode, another successful, albeit drunken, wedding in the books. "Why don't you get out of here, and I'll make sure things get locked up after cleanup. After all this foolishness, you deserve a night off," Marjorie insisted. "You sure?" "Positive. Enjoy the rest of tonight. We can debrief later." "Thanks, Mom." Leave it to her mother to give her a much-needed break, especially under the circumstances. After trudging upstairs to her loft apartment above the reception space for a quick change out of her professional wedding planner attire into something more comfortable, Nikki was soon on her way toward the quaint downtown area of Cold Creek. Rolling her neck around a few times while gripping the steering wheel of her SUV, she was more than ready for the laid-back evening ahead. The thick foliage of green summer leaves on either side of the road whizzed past her in the lingering daylight, and the only thing on her mind after yet another perfectly planned wedding was a tall, frosty craft beer from the local pub on Main Street, and catching up with her friend Amber, who owned the place. When her thriving business, White Barn Weddings, took off the previous summer, Nikki became intentional about not overdoing it. The last thing she wanted was to inundate her family's upstate New York organic farm with constant, demanding bride and groom traffic. Early on, she decided to allow only one wedding per weekend. It was all she could reasonably handle with her small staff during the peak season, and, even then, her mother often stepped in to help out with the larger groups. The family farm renewed a magical hometown heartbeat, and the barn was that pulse. The exterior restoration of the structure emphasized the classic gable roofline with white board batten siding with black trim. The cherry on top was the stacked fieldstone lower siding wrapped like an apron all the way around. The large structure was the perfect setting for a shabby chic reception in the country. Modern restrooms and an industrial kitchen completed the massive renovations, and the loft was transformed into an on-site living space for her. From the ambient string lights hung in the rafters to the small stage and state-of-the-art sound equipment ready for a local band, her family's barn was a sought-after reception space for New Yorkers tying the knot. Add the idyllic village of Cold Creek to the mix, and it was a win-win for her family and the community. What really catapulted her small business into a thriving moneymaker almost overnight was Fiona Merrill's wedding to Nikki's dear friend and part-time neighbor, Chris Ballard. Leave it to Fiona, a billionaire philanthropist and socialite, to gush about her in last fall's Modern Bride magazine, solidifying Nikki's new business on the map. Fiona went on and on in the article about the intimate reception space and the attention to detail Nikki became known for. What really did the trick was the glossy photo spread of the famous couple staring dreamily at each other in front of a long table laden with picture-perfect food, flowers, and flickering candles against the backdrop of rustic elegance. It was the ideal advertisement for White Barn weddings, and she was grateful. Shaking off the stress of the day, Nikki turned onto Main Street. The collective charm of the town was steeped in historic 19th century architecture like that of the River House Inn. The quaint, eclectic cafes, trinket shops, boutiques, and charming bookstore added to the laid-back village. The Good Pub was the local watering hole, but for Nikki it was a refreshing retreat from her daily grind. Her best friend Amber owned the place and was known for featuring award-winning local craft beer and spirits, and of course, the best burgers in town. Nikki furrowed her brow when she noticed the entrance to Amber's pub lined with people out the door. This wasn't unusual per se, since the small town often held a good bit of tourists throughout the summer, but standing in line after the day she had wasn't part of her retreat and relaxed plan for the night. Screw this. Steering her way through the throngs of people and cars, Nikki turned into the nearby train station's parking lot. The tracks ran parallel to the Hudson River, and she could see in the distance a boat loaded with passengers heading toward the marina after a long tour, no doubt several of them ending up at the pub later for a cocktail. Quickly, she shoved her keys into the pocket of her frayed denim shorts and hit the pavement. A warm summer breeze blew her thick hair over her shoulders, and she couldn't help but smile at the sweet pleasures of her hometown, Cold Creek. The Saturday evening crowd buzzed happily around her with shopping bags full of treasures, and little kids snacked on drippy ice cream cones and Italian ice from the local creamery. Nikki darted into the narrow alley that led to the pub's back entrance and pushed the giant metal door with her shoulder. Once inside the kitchen area, she greeted Amber's staff with a warm welcome. "Hey!" Her senses were immediately assaulted with a whiff of spicy buffalo sauce and chicken wings one of the cooks tossed in a silver bowl. "Easy on the hot sauce, Fred," she kidded, slapping the young guy on the shoulder. "Where's Amber?" "Hey, Nick. Well, at the moment she's playing barback and restocking the booze. We're getting slammed. Did you see the crowd tonight? Fucking crazy." "I know, there's a line out the door. What's going on?" she asked, grabbing a carrot stick from the garnishing station and taking a bite. "Some hotshot musician showed up out of the blue. He talked Amber into letting him do an unplugged concert. I guess word got out." During the busy summer season, the Good Pub often hosted bands coming through on their way to the Big Apple, keeping the locals and the influx of tourists entertained. It wasn't unusual for live music to bring in a large crowd. Nikki swallowed and watched Fred plate the hot wings, wondering why Amber hadn't mentioned any surprise musicians. As soon as Fred set the dish on the service counter, a waitress clad in shorts and a black t-shirt with the pub logo swooped in and grabbed it. "Thanks, Fred." "Hey, Nikki!" the young waitress hollered, making a beeline out the swivel doors. "Hey, Monica!" Nikki shouted back. Taking another bite of the carrot, she turned to Fred. "What's the musician's name? Anyone I'd know?" The friendly cook was already working on plating several burgers hot off the grill, his hands moving nonstop in the busy kitchen. "I can't remember his name. I only listen to country music, and this guy isn't even American. He's got a funny accent, reddish hair. He and his cousin are hanging out in Amber's office till showtime." He motioned his head toward her feet. "I'm sure Amber could use some extra help tonight behind the bar. Good thing you're wearing closed-toe shoes." Nikki glanced at her worn boat shoes, standard wear in the summertime unless she was feeling extra feisty and wore her cowboy boots. "Sure, I can help." Stuffing the rest of the carrot into her mouth, she tied her dark hair back with a red bandana she'd tucked in her pocket before heading toward the swivel doors that led to the bar area. The boisterous crowd could be heard from the other side, the current of excitement in the air buzzing like a live electric wire. Putting her hand out to palm the door open, she nearly collided with Amber. "Girl, I'm so glad you're here," Amber shrieked, grabbing Nikki's elbow and pulling her toward the closed door of the office. The bar owner was energetic and quick on her feet, her dirty blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail with several errant wisps floating around her face. "Who's in there?" Nikki asked as she watched her friend blow a puff of air to move a stray piece of hair out of her vision. Amber was clearly overworked and overheated, evidence of perspiration dotting her upper lip. A huge smile erupted across her cherub face. "Reed McPherson and his cousin James. Can you believe it?" Amber's big brown eyes were animated as she slid her fingers across the wooden door with reverence. "Who?" Nikki tilted her head, trying to recall the name. "Oh my God, You need to get out more, or at least fix the damn radio in your SUV. Reed McPherson, she scolded as if Nicky should know precisely who that was. At the sight of Amber's flustered state, a giggle erupted from Nicky's mouth. Sorry, doesn't ring a bell, she admitted, shaking her head. Sure, she enjoyed good music, but she was an oldies girl thanks to her father. Give her a crooner and a tux with a full orchestra, and she was a happy camper. Amber rolled her eyes and grabbed the doorknob. You can thank me later. Swinging the door open with gusto, she revealed two handsome men seated on folding chairs. They looked up with interest with their acoustic guitars perched on their laps and picks in hand. Amber pulled Nicky by the elbow into the room, and as if on cue, the guy with reddish hair and tattoos decorating his muscled arms grinned. Gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend Nicky Sinclair. She'll be taking care of you tonight. Still staring at the two gorgeous men, Nicky did a double take before she focused on her friend with eyebrows raised. I am? She stuttered, not sure what her friend was up to. Amber winked with a nod. Whatever you want, guys. Just let Nick know and she'll get it for you. She's local and knows everyone in this town. You're in good hands. By this time, the two men were standing, the one with the reddish hair continuing to grin from ear to ear. His cornflower blue eyes seemed to rake over her from head to toe. Nicky, it's a pleasure. We're glad to meet ye. When he reached out to shake her hand, Nicky's focus turned to the intricate designs of the tattoos on his exposed forearms. She'd never seen anything like them. When she slid her hand into his, he leaned forward and kissed her knuckles, causing her skin to tingle. I'm Reed McPherson. Ye can call me Mac. This here is my cousin James. How do you do? James bowed, his brow arching as if he were trying to hide a definitive smirk. Their distinct accents, chivalrous behavior, and large muscular frames took up most of the space in Amber's cramped office, and Nicky could feel an unexpected heat rise on the back of her neck. Nice to meet you, too, she muttered, befuddled by the two foreigners. Fellas, I gotta go sling some drinks. You good to start in 10? Amber asked. The sprightly woman was all of 5 feet and stood with her hands on her hips as if she were the tallest person in the room. Aye, 10 works, James replied, taking a seat to tune his guitar strings. Nicky couldn't help noticing the shimmer of a silver band on his left hand. I'll be back in 10 minutes to get you then. Amber turned to Nicky and raised an eyebrow. She knew that look. Her spirited friend was up to something for sure, and leaving her in a small room with ridiculously good-looking musicians seemed to be part of her plot. Get these guys whatever they want. Just help yourself behind the bar, okay? If they need any food from the kitchen, have Monica ring it up on the house tab. Standing on her tiptoes, she gave Nicky a quick peck on the cheek before exiting, pulling the door shut with a thump. Nicky stood there with her mouth hanging open, speechless. Reed McPherson continued to stare at her, which made her uncomfortable. Clearing her throat, she tucked an errant strand of hair behind her ear, determined not to come undone. So, where are you guys from? Mr. McPherson's lips curled up into a smile from behind his full beard. Aberdeen. Nicky nodded, acting like she knew where that was. Oh, sure. She rocked back and forth on her heels and snapped her fingers in mock recognition. Aberdeen. Scotland, James added with a distinct brogue. Yes, Scotland. Aberdeen, Scotland. I knew that. Pressing her lips together, she nodded while averting Mac's humored blue gaze. So, what'll it be, fellas? Guinness stout? Whiskey? Amber carries mostly craft beer and spirits made here in the state of New York. She couldn't help the way her voice shifted into Cold Creek tour guide. Living in the small town her entire life and running a lucrative wedding business full-time made her keen to all of the vendors and small companies in the area. The Hill Rock Estate Distillery has a nice single malt whiskey I'd recommend, she continued. I've been on an excursion there. I learned they import Scottish peat for their malt house. Her sentence ended with a shaky giggle, realizing she was babbling and couldn't stop. She internally chided herself. It was that or melt into a puddle underneath the gorgeous Mr. McPherson's feet. The man was dressed in black denim, sturdy motorcycle boots, and a black tee that accentuated his rock-hard physique. A silver pendant hung around his neck, and his hair was a shade lighter than the neatly trimmed auburn beard he sported across his fair-skinned face. His coloring was the exact opposite of his cousin James, who had dark curls and hazel eyes. It was hard to conceive they were actually related. Sounds wonderful, Mac interrupted, as long as you join us for a wee dram. Nicky pressed her lips together to thwart off a smile and to stop her jabber. Every single time this man opened his mouth, his accent made her heart pitter-patter. Her dimples begged to make an appearance in a full-throttle smile, and she finally relented, offering the handsome Scot a wide grin. She could feel the indentations of the dimples in her heated cheeks. Very well then, I'll be back momentarily with some shots. Acting the professional hostess was easy because it's what she did every day in her wedding business. As she started for the door, she hesitated with another thought. Oh, would you like anything to eat? The good pub offers the best hamburger in town, and the wings are hot and spicy. The two men eyed each other with cheeky snickers. Good God, why did she have to put the words hot and spicy together in a sentence? Mac bit his lower lip and dipped his head in a way only a handsome musician could. When he stared right at her, his eyebrow hitched. Hot and spicy indeed. But not before a performance. Perhaps you'll join us later for some later with that whiskey? Nikki could feel a bead of sweat trickle between her breasts and was tempted to fan herself. Clearing her throat to gain some composure, she stood a little taller. Sure, Mr. McPherson. I'd be happy to arrange some food for you and your cousin for after the show. Lass, call me Mac.